God's making this in all this process. We've been taught this view that he just kind of did the Harry Potter, you've heard me cliche this, poof, and it appeared. No, it appeared complete. Remember, it's like us sitting on Earth looking up, and all of a sudden the sun's lit. You see all the planets, so they're finished. That's the context of this passage. It's not that he just, from nothing did all this. From nothing he started with what in day one? What was in day one? He had what? What did he begin with? What was the ingredient? Water. So he's building all this up. Everything, including what you see up here and all this, right? Everything's made out of water, which is utterly amazing, but it's true. All right? So when God completes an act, he proclaims it good. And you'll see that he puts another descriptor in front of good when he gets everything completed. All right, so when we come up with a concept of good, right, we have this view which is what? Pre-flood or post-flood? Where are we at relative to the flood? Pre? We're pre-flood? No, post. Both of them start with a P, right? 50-50, right? Yes. So remember, our worldview is everything post-flood. The way the planets are orbiting, the way the solar system works, okay? Everything is post-flood. So when we see, I don't know if you can someone dim the lights up here? Thank you, sir. I don't know if you can see, does anybody know what planet this is? That's Mars. Can anybody see stuff on Mars that doesn't look good? Yeah. Do you see some stuff on Mars that doesn't really look good? Yeah, see, we have this concept that oh, that's just good. That's how he made it. Well, you're going to find out that's not the case. Here is a picture, just a graphic of our solar system based on radar. And remember, radar is the only technique that we know absolute sizes and distances from. All the other redshift, all that other stuff is pure conjecture as far as how far and how big stuff are away. Does anybody know what all this white stuff is that is between Mars and Jupiter? Asteroid belt. Yeah, right? And then we have what's called, I love this, the Trojans and the Greeks, which are other asteroids that are actually in line behind and ahead of the orbit of Jupiter. What I'm going to show you when we get to the flood is that is not good. That doesn't mean the solar system doesn't work. It just means this view is pre or post flood. Post. That's what we see today. See, we have this concept that these things are good. They're not good in God's context. How did God create the universe? Remember after Adam and Eve, see, we're going to talk about this. Adam of the garden, or let me ask you, core forever. Yeah, to last forever. And a lot of people forget that. We get caught up in, remember, we've talked about the second law. I've showed you already that we've got violations of it, even in simple science experiments. But the bottom line is that we have this view, because of our worldview, that is good. We look at this beautiful scene right here, and we see these sharp mountain peaks and the beautiful snow and the trees, and we think that is good. Yeah, we think it is good. All right? Well, we'll see how your view is here in the next 3 to 4 weeks as we get into the flood. So let's move on. So the next thing is everything is prepared. The earth is there. All the biological plant life and everything God has formed, okay, from water. He has formed all this. And so now God is ready to establish what in day 5? What is the whole purpose of getting the earth ready? For life. For life. So God's going to start with what we would consider, as far as scientifically, the lower echelon of life. And he's going to start with the creatures, the birds of the air, and they're going to fly across the face of the firmament. Remember, that firmament word doesn't mean a solid dome. It just means an expanse. And that's kind of where the birds are. The birds don't fly way up in our atmosphere. They're kind of closer to the earth. There's a reason they're closer to the earth, because that's where the food is. And so God also created those along with the great sea creatures and every living thing that moves. And the waters abounded according to their kind. Now, that word kind is very interesting, because we tend to think, and I've heard atheists come in and say, well, there's no way Adam named all the animals because there's too many species, right? What's the problem with that thinking? Not only is it post-flood thinking, but has anybody ever studied that word kind? Do you know that word? See, we have this definition of species, right? And they're trying to basically supplant and put that on top of the biblical word kind. Kind, in the context, has nothing to do except things that can multiply on the earth. So God, how many birds did he create? Anybody know? I don't. Yeah, I don't know. And genetically, we know that how many of the animals. What we do know that he uses the word abundance, so I would assume a lot. But then again, how big's the earth relative to us? Huge, right? So God could have created 10,000 birds, but I believe there's more than 10,000 birds on the earth. I don't know. But the bottom line is, what is the main purpose of God creating them, male and female? He creates the birds, and he saw that it was good. He created all the creatures that are in the water and their kind, and it was good. He blessed them, saying what? Yeah, see, that's not just to humans, be fruitful and multiply. That's to every animal on the face of the earth. And it's interesting because every animal, this word living, okay, they get this word che, all right, alive or living. It just means a being that is living. And we'll talk about that, the soul versus the spirit here in a little bit. But animals actually are referred to as having soul. But that is not, that's a generic term. Soul can be used specifically referring to what? Man's eternal part, or it can be just referring to the living breath that's in all animals. All right, so God basically says, he tells them to fill the waters. We don't know how many he created, but the first thing he tells them to do is procreate. And that's one way God filled the waters. I don't believe God created, a lot of people say fiat. He basically just went poof, and there were a bazillion krill for all the whales, right? I don't know how many whales there were and how many krill there were that they like to eat, but in the end of the day, they were to reproduce and fill the seas, and they did that probably over time after he created them. In God's infinite wisdom, he knew that there would be plenty of food as all that is building up. So anyhow, the evening and the morning were the fifth day. So when you see this word che, this is going to come back to us in a little bit. This word just means something that's alive or living. All right? So in the next phrase, he's going to go now off of the air and the water, and he's going to start focusing on what did he make appear out of the water? The land, right? So he's going to go after the animals. He breaks it up into the cattle, the creeping things, and the beast of the earth. Each according, here's that word again, each according to its kind. We don't know how many of each kind he did and how many kinds they were, but he basically breaks them up into three. Cattle, which I would assume is like horses, cows, and oxen and things. Beast of the field will be all of the wild animals that we would think of. And then the creeping things, everything that everybody likes to see in Georgia, which like to get in your house, right? Which is why you have the pest control, all right? So creeping things. And once again, it was so, and God made the beast of the earth according to its kind. Notice what he keeps saying, the cattle to its kind, everything according to, why does he keep saying everything according to its kind? The reason is because we know that species cannot intermix, right? A feline cannot mix with a canine and produce offspring. There is a law of nature. It's been embedded in Genesis for the most of ancient time. But yet we're taught, and our children are taught, and our grandchildren, for many in here, are taught what? That the species did what? They evolved from each other, right? And then you've heard the missing link. Show me the cattle/beast mix, or whatever that happens to be, and it's not there. But God saw that it was good. Now, what's interesting about it is God uses the word what's called yatsah, which means to go or come out. So he said what? Let the what bring forth? Earth. Now, what are we made out of? Dust, right? Earth, dirt. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's the same thing for the animals. They actually came forth from the earth, and that's talked about in chapter 2 in more detail. Yes? Somebody?
Explain the frogs turning from male to female. How do you explain the frogs turning from male to female?
Let me write that down. I'll send it upstairs and he'll answer you. So what do you mean the frogs turning from male to female? There's certain animals, right, that are asexual, right? Everybody understand what that term means, right? In fact, if you look at the human being, right, there is only some chemical differences and things that God knows genetically and all that, which differentiate the male species from the female species in Homo sapiens. And sometimes bad things happen genetically because we're post-flood. And you read about situations where, is that person a male or a female? You could look at genetically speaking. That a frog turns male and female, I'd have to study that one more. You put me on the spot on that one. I'm sure that there's a reason scientifically behind that, and I know God has a reason, which is the most important. But I guess what you're asking is if he made a male and female, why is one changing to the other? I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is I don't see a frog turn it into a bird, or a bird into a frog. That's about, that may not answer your question, but I'll study that one more and see if I can come up with anything on that. There are some weird creatures. You ever seen like on National Geographic and some of the history, they go down into the bottom of the ocean. You ever seen some of the creatures down there? There's some scary looking things down there. And I have no idea why God created those and why they behave the way they did, but it's part of his ecosystem that he did, and there is a reason behind it. Why do we have an appendix? They still debate that one in the medical literature. They don't know. I know there's a reason. Maybe it's pre-flood reason. I don't know, but who knows? That there's things that God will always know in his mind that we'll have to ask him about, if it'll even matter at that point. All right. So next, God said, "Let us make man." Now it's interesting that the Hebrew word for man is actually the word that you think of as a proper name. And what was his name that was first created? Adam. The Hebrew word likeness. Now let me ask you the question. Refer to him as a he, right? Because of strength and power. But if you actually go through Scripture and study it, attributes to God are both male and female. It kind of makes sense. Because empathy, right? caring and love tend to be more, and I'm not saying males don't have that, but it tends to be more of on the female side. All of that, ladies, comes from God. Your attributes too. Not the physical attributes. I'm talking about the things that are in your mind and the way that God made you. So God is neither male nor female. And this is where Jesus said, you are mistaken, because in the judgment and beyond in eternity, they are neither given in marriage, but we are going to be like the angels in heaven. There's no male and female, guys. People tend to think this way. There's male and female here on earth, because the purpose of that is to be what and what? That's the only reason for male and female. There will be no reason for that in heaven. Right? Now, will we have male attributes and female attributes as far as, I don't know how God does that, but I do know we're going to recognize one another. You can ask God that one. That's one of those ones, no one knows. The only way to know that is to go there and see. But God is making man in his image, which means we have the ability to do what above all the other animals? Think and reason. That's the mind Matt talks about, the Bible talks about, the spirit. That's that ability to reason logically, to think at a level that's far beyond anything else. But also, God is going to give us something that the other animals don't have, which is what? That mind is eternal. Yeah, that spirit. It's eternal. The animals don't have that. Sophia's not happy with me teaching her that, because she thinks there will be cats in heaven. I'm like, well, maybe God will make spiritual cats because he'll make everybody happy, right? I don't know how that's going to look, but in the end of the day, God gave us that eternal nature. So he gave us the breath of life, which is where the word soul comes from, but he also gave us in his image that ability to think and to reason. And notice, because we can think and reason like God, and be careful when I said that, like God, not as God, right? God thinks and reason. We can think and reason. We got that from him. That doesn't mean we can think and reason at his level. We cannot. But in the end of the day, he gave us that so that we would have dominion over everything on the earth. That word dominion does not mean you lord over it. Where have you heard that phrase from? Do not lord over? When we talk about the qualifications of elders, what does it say? Yeah, they're not to lord over the flock. What does that mean in the context of that passage? Yeah, like oppression, right? To that point. In fact, raising your children, it says, be careful that you don't overbear on them, because you'll cause them to go the opposite way. See, that's that love side of discipline. It's both. Okay? So this word dominion means man is to care and tend over all of the creation. All right? That is what that means. So God created, and that's that word bara, from nothing. Now think about this. We are created from nothing, but yet that doesn't mean we weren't formed out of something. We were formed, as we're going to see, from the what? The dust of the ground. But where did the dust come from? The water. And where did the water come from? God spoke it into existence. So man is both created from nothing, bara, because he came from the water that was spoken into existence, and he was made. He was made in that image, all right, in his own image, the image of God. This is Hebrew kind of, I would call it poetry, but they like to repeat it. Created man in his own image, in the image of God, he created him. Now notice what he says here. He puts this kind of as a parenthesis, male and female, he created them. Now is God male and female? No. What he's getting to the point is, there's a spiritual side of man, his own image, and there is a physical side of man, the male and the female. Jesus said when he was asked about divorce and remarriage with the Pharisees, he says, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, permitted you to give a divorce for what? basically any reason for a time. But Jesus said, from the what? It wasn't so. Now, we as a congregation and our elders specifically have been through a lot in the recent months. And I will tell you right now, this is the foundation of all of nature. This is why God vehemently in the Bible condemns anything that goes against male and female and procreation. It is a law, it's a moral law that was embedded in creation itself. You start to understand why there's certain things that God cannot stand. And some things I think he cannot stand more than others. But notice what it says. God blessed them. Oh, wait a minute. Them. So who's he referring to here? Eve also. All right. We're going to go to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is going to be a focus just on the creation of man and what happened with him. Okay. So 1 is everything. 2 is going to focus in. And he's already leading us in. He's already leading us in. There was more than one that was created. Because God said to them what? Be free. Adam obviously cannot do that by himself. Just to be blunt. That's impossible. All right? You're right. Unless God created him different. But he didn't. And notice what he says. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves on it. So we've just talked about God is not male or female, brother, but he has the attributes that he has given to us. And one is empathy and to love one another. What did Jesus preach this whole, pretty much every day of his life? The greatest commandment I give unto you is, it's love. The agape love. The agape love. All right? And that's the greatest commandment. All right. Now notice what it says in the next verses. And God said to man, and Eve in this point, I've given you every herb of the field which yields seed on the face of the earth, and every tree which yields fruit in the seed. To you it shall be for food, but also every beast of the earth and every bird of the air and creeps on the earth, where there is life, that's that soul word, nephesh, I have given every green herb for food. So, we come to the conclusion that man was a what at the beginning? He was a vegetarian. Absolutely, he was a vegetarian. Not only was man a vegetarian, which this goes contrary to evolutionary principles, obviously, but also what else was vegetarians? The animals were. See, that's hard for us to conceive because we are post-flood. A lot of things are going to change when we get on the other side of the flood, as you'll see. Now, notice what it says. All of man and animal, the animal side of the kingdom has been made, and God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was. And what is the word he put in front of good? Yeah, very good, right? This basically means it is good in the sense of total completeness. Everything is done now, all right? And the evening and the morning were the sixth day, which tells us that God was very busy on that day, right? Creating all of the living animals that are on the face of the earth. It's utterly amazing how fast that he did all this. All right, any questions on that? We'll stop, pause. I'm trying to do better about that and get going. But it's pretty straightforward when you think about it. And remember, as God is developing these creatures, pull out of your head this view of pop, poof, because that's not what the Bible reads. And you're going to see some of that here in a minute. All right? If we take Genesis 1, 26 and 27, and then we look over a little bit of foreshadowing here into Genesis 2, 7 and 19, and God formed man from the dust of the ground. One of the brothers here asked the question, can you explain more on what it means about man being created from the dust? I'll give you a couple of hints, but beyond that, the secrets are his. As Brother A.W. Dykus said, God holds the what in his hand? The germ, referring to the germ of life, is what he's referring to. So God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed in his nostrils the breath of life. That's that nephesh word. And man became a living being. Okay? That living being word is the same being che, the living being that he uses of animals. That's not referring to man's eternal side. That means God gave every breathing animal life. That's a gift. Now, what law can you think of is implied by that if somebody comes over and takes someone else's life? Yeah, murder. And what's going to be the second sin that's recorded in the Bible? Murder. Yeah, it's wrong to take life because God specifically gave that to the. And in fact, it's wrong for man to even kill an animal at this point. And that will change when we get to the flood. And that's that word nephesh. It just means a soul, a living being, a life. Remember, not a soul eternally, because animals are living beings also. But just the point, that's a generic term that you have to look at the specifics. So what do we have? Man in all creation was bara, created from nothing, water. Asa, he was made, and yatsar, which basically means he's formed. Remember the verses up in the Psalms and the Proverbs? It talks about God forming us like a what? A potter with the clay. Yeah, he forms us like a potter with the clay. And so God uses all these words. And there's been huge debates. Well, you know, bara, asa, and yatsa mean the same thing. No, they don't. And I've been taught that for a long time. They do not. On the other hand, I got people saying, well, because they don't mean exactly the same thing, that means there's billions of years between the words. It's kind of how they come at it. They're both wrong, right? They're both wrong, all right? But notice, man in all creation was created out of nothing, bara, and that ingredient we just talked about was water. He was made from the existing materials, not existing as in for eternity, but the ingredients that he made up here on the first day, out of the water. He made man out of the dust. He processed that by water, from water by God, and that's where he made man. And he also formed him with his shape, right, by his very hands. And that's that imagery of a potter working with the clay to form a vessel, which is what we're referred to. Because our vessel holds our what? Our mind. Now, someone can explain that. God created a law that operates on the spiritual world and the physical world. And when a child is conceived in the womb, God puts a spirit, a eternal soul into that child. How does that eternal soul, how is that held in your body? Good question. And you can ponder that for eternity because no one knows the answer to that one. That once again is a secret of God. How does that work? You know, it blows our minds, if you will, to understand these things. But God did all three of these, and he did it in 6 24-hour periods, is what we've been talking about for the last 2 months. Just because God did a process of making things and not Harry Potter poof does not mean that evolution is true. All right? It's not A or B, but a separate C is what he actually did. And here's some of the words now. God created us out of the earth, all right? And that it comes from a very ancient word called afar, which basically means the dry earth or the dust. And all living creatures were made and formed from the materials that were in the earth. It doesn't just mean dirt in the sense of what you would just dig up. It's whatever was in the earth, all the minerals and everything, okay? Because what are human beings made out of for some of our medical type people, right? We got carbon, we got oxygen, we got right? We're made out of all that stuff. That's what's in the earth. And that's what that verse means, okay? That God used the ingredients that were in the dirt to make us, to form us, all right? And later on we find out we were made from that dust and our body is going to return to that dust because of sin, all right? Now, the question is, does empirical, remember that's not scientism, but does true empirical science help us with any indication on any parts of this process? And people always say, oh, no, you can't ask that question because that's God, right? No, God reveals to us stuff in nature. He knew we were going to put satellites up in orbit. Remember, we talked about that. He knows we're going to discover stuff. In fact, reading ahead a little bit, There's a group of men after the flood, probably women too, obviously, men and women, that build what? This huge tower, right? And what did God say? Come, let us go down, basically, destroy the tower, spread the people out, lest they do what? Whatever their mind will entail. See, God knows we have the ability to think. Now, it doesn't mean we have the ability to get to his level. We do not. Who was it that thought he could be at that ability with God? Yeah, Satan. And what happened to him when he had that thought? Yeah, he got booted out, right? He got booted out of heaven. So, we already have learned from some of the stuff in the first days that God created laws of nature, and he uses those to their fullest extent, and I'm going to put in brackets here, well beyond man's understanding, that he can accelerate processes and he can do everything exactly the way that is recorded, and he did. Now, obviously, we don't know very much, but the little we know shows that infinite wisdom and power of God, because only he could do this. All right. All right, who's ever heard of a Lichtenberg figure? Anybody ever heard of that? I'd not heard of it. Well, I have now, but when I was in college, I started learning about some of this stuff. I'd never heard of it, at least up into my 20s. And so it's not a big deal, but these Lichtenberg figures are very important, not only for the creation discussion, but they're really going to be important when we get into the cataclysm, basically the flood. Because we're going to learn about things that God did. The Bible tells us that God did what? He broke open the what in the flood? The fountains of the deep. And he opened up the windows of, and what came from both? Water. Yeah. Put that as a mental bookmark in your noggin and just hang on to that one, because we're going to be coming back to this. So there's this fellow, we're not going to harp on this too much, named Lichtenberg. Yes, he was German, if you're wondering, because of the last name. He was a physicist. And he basically discovered these figures, and it has to do with electric discharge. Well, what has that got to do with anything? All right, well, we're going to learn by pictures today, because I'm visual when it comes to this kind of stuff, and it really makes a lot of sense. So I don't know if anybody's ever seen a Lichtenberg figure, but they're very beautiful. Basically, you can take acrylic or some type of glass, and if you apply basically a huge electric potential, like a positive and a negative, with a big power supply, and you basically take a hammer and you whack the electrode so it touches, basically the electricity goes through the acrylic and creates some pretty beautiful structures, right? And amazingly enough, I don't think it would cost that much money, but I'm sure they sell these things for about 4,000% on what it took to make. Because it doesn't, and in fact, these things are made in probably, someone asked me, I think, femtosecond. And so he said, what is a femtosecond? Really small. Okay, that's all that is. A nanosecond, microsecond, just real small amount. These things are almost instantaneously made. That's how fast. It's just boop, and it's there. All right, that's how fast the electricity moves. Well, why is that interesting? Because we see these Lichtenberg patterns all over creation. There's a reason for that. Now, most of what we see today is not pre-flood, but post-flood. Yeah, that's another one. Put that bookmark in your head, because we're going to come back to it. All right? This one was actually made in wood. It's a Lichtenberg figure, and then I think the lady took some type of really beautiful mineral-based paint, and she put the paint inside all of the hollowness of where the electricity basically bored out the pattern. Does that look like something to anybody? Somebody said the R word. Rivers. Looks like rivers, doesn't it? Yeah, just wait till we get to the flood. Here's one. I love this one. What does that look like? Sorry for I guess I should have put a block here, right? So hopefully in the aspects of science, hopefully everybody's okay with this picture. This is what happens when lightning strikes your body. Anybody know what that looks like? Lichtenberg figure. See, Lightning can create these patterns in any material. Air, your body, acrylic, earth, outer space, other planets. Hint, hint. Put a bookmark down. This guy, and the patterns differ based on how strong the electricity is. Okay? That's why some of them look different. And the materials and where it strikes. I'm not going to tell you where this guy probably got struck, but anyhow. This guy had too much energy. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, this poor fella, it actually went up his neck and actually maligned his ear. That's how bad it is. Here's one. Where's the guy at? You better be careful. You know what that is, don't you? That's the putting green. Oh, there somebody saw Caddyshack, where the guy holds up, the priest holds up the putter and he gets struck by lightning. Yeah, you better watch out. Here's a Lichtenberg figure on a putting green. Lightning struck about right here, and you can see the pattern shooting out in all the spokes. Oh, there's a Lichtenberg figure in air. What is that? Lightning. That's the return stroke of lightning. What does that look like? A tree. There's a reason these physical things look the way they do. Here is a lady that was struck by lightning. Can everybody see? It kind of looks like evergreen. That's what that looks like the leaves of evergreen. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see where she was struck. Here's another one that basically matches that pattern. Anybody know where this bottom picture was taken from? Mars. Not even on our planet. Oh, wait a minute. What is this? Anybody see any patterns in here? Yeah. Lichtenberg figures on your heart. What does that look like? See it? God not only created the ingredients, he created the tools by which he shaped you and I. Did God just use lightning and electric stuff to create us from when he formed us from the dust? He used that tool, but he has other tools. And those are the laws of nature that I can't even tell you about, because as Job would say, I would repent in ashes and dust, because his knowledge and wisdom are infinite. But if anyone tells me that God didn't use some of the processes of natures to create man out of dust, they got a hard way to go to explain why those things look the way they do. How fast does the lightning and the electricity create these kinds of things in our bodies? And when God formed us, how long did it take? I don't know exactly, but it fit within 24 hours of time. And it was all animals that were created this way. If you look at these figures, they're in all the animals. How he did it is utterly amazing. But remember, just because I can show you some things physically that he used to form us does not mean I can explain everything through nature, because that is what? That's evolution. They're trying to tell you that, oh, this was just, accident and random. That's not accident and random, brethren. That's someone who controls nature using those tools that he made on day one when water existed in space to use those. To me, that shows more power of God than anything. That he can use these tools in ways that just blows our mind. Here's a nice one. You can see how the Lichtenberg figure comes out on the ground, but that's lightning actually striking a tree. It's kind of interesting how that works. Remember this verse, and we're done. Job 36:32, and this was Elihu. This was the young man who was not condemned by God. You read about Job, it's always the three friends. No, there was a fourth. He was the young man. He spoke, God did not condemn him, and he says God covers his hands with lightning and he commands it to strike. And he controlled it on the day that he made man, and every other law of nature that is involved in that. And he formed us from the dust of the ground in the matter of hours or less. Isn't that beautiful? Nature is beautiful. All right. Real quick, any questions? I know we got to go. Now, now you guys are all experts in Lichtenberg figures. See, teaching by this way, this is the way I learned it. Brethren, we shouldn't be scared of real science. It's the man's philosophy, scientisms, the stuff we got to watch out for. And we shouldn't be scared to swing the pendulum to the other extreme and say, well, I can't explain anything in creation, and God just magically poof things into existence. Well, he did with water, right, and space, and light, energy, but that's not the whole story, right? God said, speak to the earth, and she will teach thee of all the great things that he hath done. Yes, sir, Rick?
It says, end of chapter 1, up there.
Yep.
There's one more thing I think we need to say.
Yes, sir.
The seventh day, it says God rested.
Yes.
That does not mean he recovered from the exertion of creating. That is a post-flood concept of rest. Sabbath, he stopped.
And I would say that is chapter 2, verse 2.
Pardon?
That's chapter 2, verse 2.
Well, yeah.
But that's not the end of the story, is what you're saying. Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, next week, we're going to start with that very verse, chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. And Brother Rick is exactly right. God didn't need exertion rest, right? He was tired. Very good. Thank you for your attention.